step in moving towards right relationship with the Native people and the healing of the earth. And I'm so glad to know that we're recording now. So good morning and welcome to First Parish Church. My name is Katy Weeks. I currently serve on the Endowment Committee. So if you have any questions about money or legacy stuff, you can ask me. If this is your first time, we welcome you. And I just want to point out that I don't think any of our staff are here, but our staff currently are, oh gosh. I want to introduce the one staff person who's here, and I've been in contact with him all morning. His name is Brad, and Brad Dumont, and he's our music director. Cindy is on a much-deserved break. She's went up to Maine for a reading retreat, and our now interim religious education director is Marissa Evans. So yay. So if this is your first time with us, we welcome you. And please feel free to ask myself or any of the people that you see up here, and actually most of the people around, if you've got any questions about the church after the service. Our minister is Reverend Cindy Landrum. Again, she's up in Maine. And for your safety and those around you, we ask that you please keep your masks on and properly over your nose. And after the service, it's our custom to have coffee hour, and we don't really actually have coffee now because we're not eating indoors. But we encourage you to either gather together here after the service or outside on this gorgeous day, and let's get together. So I don't have any announcements, so please feel free to greet your neighbor at this time.
Hello, everybody, from very, very Arkansas.
Hello,
hi, Jane.
Hello, everybody.
Might not get to 100 today. Woo!
That would be a treat.
I'm in Maine today.
Oh, whereabouts in Maine?
Lovell, Cedar Lake, Freiburg, Maine.
Nice.
Oh,
Western Maine.
Lovely place to be.
It's not quite as hot here, and we're right next to a lake, so it's good.
Good.
Great, great.
so Hannah, I was telling you, I didn't realize just when they muted us, I was telling you that I loved your what you said last week at the last week's service.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It was a
Yeah, I really appreciated what you had to say too, Johanna. I didn't know some of those things about your background.
Yeah, I know. We don't know each other as well as we think we do.
Yeah.
I mean, having gone to Episcopalians here, big difference.
And good morning. Good morning to everyone on this beautiful day. The call to worship today is You Are Who I Love by Aracelis Girmay. You, at the edges and shores, in the rooms of quiet, in the rooms of shouting, in the airport terminal, at the bus depot saying no, and each of us looking out from the gorgeous unlikelihood of our lives at all, finding ourselves here, witness to each other's tenderness, which this moment is fury, is rage, which this moment is another way of saying, you are who I love. You are who I love. You and you and you are who.
This morning's Chalice words are by A Spark of Hope by Melanie Davis. If ever there were a time for a candle in the darkness, this would be it. Using a spark of hope, kindle the flame of love, ignite the light of peace, and feed the flame of justice.
Our opening hymn is number 155, Circle Round for Freedom. And you'll notice that the words are printed in your bulletin. So if you would like to just read from the bulletin rather than the hymnal, that's an option as well.
Please stand up and join us in body or spirit. I'll sing the first two lines, and then feel free to join in. We'll sing this twice through. Circle round for freedom, a circle round for peace, for all of
join us for the covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Our reading this morning is a poem by Amanda Gorman, and members of our Racial Justice Task Force and Social Justice Committee will be reading that poem, different pieces of it. Amanda Gorman, you may remember, is the woman who, and I'm away from the mic, so sorry folks on the line, forget about this. Poem is by Amanda Gorman, and Amanda Gorman, you may remember, is the person who read a poem at Biden's inauguration, that wonderful poem. And this was written several years before when she was even younger. And it's called An American Lyric. And it was written for an inaugural reading of a poet laureate at the Library of Congress. So some of the words might sound a little bit like they're in a different building, but the building is us here today.
There's a poem in this place, in the footfalls in the halls, in the quiet beat of the seats. It is here at the curtain of day, where America writes a lyric you must whisper to say. There's a poem in Boston's Copley Square, where protest chants tear through the air, like sheets of rain, where the love of the many swallows the hatred of the few.
There's a poem in Florida, in East Texas, where streets swell into a nexus of rivers, cows afloat like mottled buoys in the brown, where courage is now so common that 23-year-old Jesus Contreras rescues people from the floodwaters.
There's a poem in Los Angeles, yawning wide as the Pacific tide, where a single mother swelters in a windowless classroom, teaching black and brown students in Watts to spell out their thoughts so her daughter might write this poem for you.
There's a lyric in California where thousands of students march for blocks, undocumented and unafraid, where my friend Rosa finds the power to blossom in deadlock, her spirit the bedrock of her community. She knows hope is like a stubborn ship gripping a dock, a truth that you can't stop a dreamer or knock down a dream.
How could this not be her city? Su nación, our country, our America, our American lyric to write. A poem by the people, the poor, the Protestant, the Muslim, the Jew, the native, the immigrant, the black, the brown, the blind, the brave, the undocumented and undeterred, the woman, the man, the non-binary, the white, the trans, the ally to all of the above, and more.
There's a poem in this place, a poem in America, a poet in every American who rewrites this nation, who tells a story worthy of being told on this minnow of an earth, to breathe hope into the plimsoll of time, a poet in every American who sees that our poem penned doesn't mean our poems end.
There's a place where this poem dwells. It is here, it is now, in the yellow song of Dawn's bell, where we write an American lyric we are just beginning to tell.
And as we continue through our service, I invite you to embrace some of this imagery and think about how you are a poet, how you yourself, your very life is a poem, and how we write those poems, we are those poets and we write those poems and put them out along the waves, knowing that they're not finished or completed, but they will be lived. And how will we live into them as we are people of the intersection? And our responsive song in thinking about who we are and how we love each other is, How Could Anyone Ever Tell You?
You can find this on page 1053. If you would like to just, if you know the tune, you've got the lyrics in your order of service.
So,
You don't need to look at it.
for those at home, page 1053, if you're in the green, the turquoise book, whatever that, teal, we'll sing it twice, and the words are in your order of service and in the chat, hopefully. Please be seated. So if anyone has not told you yet today and this morning, let me tell you that you are beautiful, that you are capable, that you are worthy, and that you are enough. What a beautiful song. Makes me cry every time I hear it. Just lovely. Coming to a time in our service where we gather in the joys and the sorrows. Katy, actually Sharon is going to be lighting our candles for that. And Katy, could I ask you if you would find a mic that actually works and take it around for folks? We lift up all of these prayers that were spoken and unspoken in our hearts, that we will hold each other in love and in support this week, this day, this moment, and always. And Katy Weeks will talk to us a bit about who we are sharing our gifts with, and then our hymn is one more step, number 168, with the words in your bulletin as well.
Okay, so during the summer months, we are sharing our weekly offering with 3L Place, Cultivate Care Farm, and MARA, which is the Maynard Anti-Racism Alliance. 3L Place is a nonprofit that provides community and opportunity to people living with autism, Down syndrome, and other developmental disabilities in a journey of lifelong learning. Diagnosis isn't important. What members have in common is their readiness to grow their abilities and to choose a path to a meaningful, gratifying, healthy, and connected adult life. Cultivate Care Farm in Bolton offers groups for teens and preteens to make friends and take care of animals. There's a lot of support for LGBTQ plus kids. It makes them feel safe there, and they like the animals. Donations to the MARA, the Maynard Anti-Racism Alliance, help fund events for anti-racist education in the greater Maynard area, as well as celebration of artists, educators, and others who have been marginalized by racism.
we should sing one more step with extra meaning and gusto and hope this week. Please stand if you desire.
Good morning again, everyone. My name is Lisa Fagerstrom. I serve as the chairperson of the Racial Justice Task Force, and I say that with humility because there are so many folks who were so involved in that work. And if you have been involved or are involved now, and Johanna online, you can raise your hand as well there. But if you would just stand as you're able, just so that people can see the folks who've been involved in the work historically and now with the Racial Justice Task Force. Yes, so thank you all. Maybe a round of applause, right? And I want to say not self-congratulatory, but just as all of us having each other's back in just how difficult this work is. So to that end, I would love for us to, and for myself as well, with the week and the time that we're in, if we could just start by some breathing. And as you breathe, I would like for you to inhale radical imagination and boldness. Don't we need that in this time? Radical imagination and boldness. And I would like for you to exhale into the universe to be taken up and recycled, that which no longer serves you. So inhale radical imagination and boldness, and exhale that which no longer serves you. So as we come back into the room and the ringing of the bowl is leaving us, I want to just thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to be able to offer a word, hopefully of encouragement, but certainly of challenge in the midst of the world that we find ourselves in. So this has been planned for months. This day, this time, this topic of intersectionality, this idea of life at the intersections. And then life happens. Anything happen on Friday? While we're minding our own business, right? And Tuesday of this week, which is really amazing the way timing works, I had the great opportunity to go to the first of 2 sessions, a workshop on white supremacy, and white supremacy particularly in mental health and in the work that people do in mental health and how it impacts our mental health. And so what an amazing thing, because then after things happen on Friday and I'm already thinking about intersections, there's so much stuff that can be brought from that. And so I will endeavor this day not to preach what we laughingly call in the biz as a kitchen sink sermon, where everything is so important and everything comes in. There's so much more, and I would be happy to stay afterwards and talk a bit with folks about this, and hopefully we can have some other times. We had a wonderful gathering on Friday evening. Our minister, Dr. Cindy Lander, Dr. Reverend Dr. Cindy Lander, led us in a vigil, and there were a number of us here that evening. And so hopefully there will be more times, I'm sure there will, for us to be reflective in that. So I was musing last evening at dinner with some friends about, isn't it interesting how, this is a person who works in a church, isn't it interesting how you plan, you have your sermon prepared, and then Friday happens. So he said, yeah, you know, there seems like there's been a lot of that this last year. It has been a year. It has been 2 years. It has been a season, has it not? And here is both the good and the not so good news, my friends. Life is lifey. And to badly quote John Lennon, life is what happens when we're busy doing other things. So we are in this together, and thus the idea of interconnectedness. Do you feel, do you believe, do you think, do you understand, have you read how what happened on Friday is interconnected to all of these isms, to the whole idea of white supremacy, to the whole idea of so much of what our country was built on? And I hate to be, but I also don't hate to be. I am, this is my life's work, I think, bringing that good and bad news all together. See, I've done this work in diversity, in equity, inclusion, and whatever work, the anti-racism, all the different kind of isms work for at least half of my adult life. I started when I was in my mid-30s, and I'm not in my mid-30s anymore, 62, so there you go for clarity. And the whole idea of who we are together and how we swim through this world together and what it means for how we stand up and how we lean back if we've been pushing in too much, how we listen to each other, how we support each other, how we raise each other up, how we cry with each other. It's a piece of this work, inextricably. Years ago, somebody introduced this idea to me of the iceberg concept of culture. Has anybody ever gone through this? Anybody understands the iceberg? So what do you know about an iceberg? This would be the congregational participation moment in life. What do you know about an iceberg? 90% underwater. Yes, almost everybody, and you've read the history books, you know about that little boat called the Titanic, right? Who only saw the thing that was a little bit above the water, and somebody said 90%, up to 90% is below the water line. So I want to suggest to you, because if I had a flip chart and stuff, I'd go through this exercise, but in the interest of time, I want to suggest to you that who we are as human beings is a lot like an iceberg. What we see when we walk around, when we look right now, right? If you look around this congregation, you might see a lot of folks like you. You might see people who are a little different than you. But we see those pieces, those things that are above the waterline. But most of who we are, most of what makes us tick, most of what makes us live the lives that we live and the things that happen in our lives is under the waterline. But we sail around, we see each other, and we just like this I can snap my fingers into the mic. Just like that, we make some decisions. I do it all the time. I've been doing this work for 35 years. I do it all the time. I make a snap decision about who that person is based on what I see. What do I lose? All of that richness that's under the surface. And if you think about an iceberg, I'm a horrible artist, so I draw icebergs like this when I draw it on a flip chart too. But if you imagine this iceberg sitting alone, floating along independently in life, that's really not how we work. We bang into each other. Maybe we try to keep our distance, but we have another iceberg that's right beside. And if you envision the place under the waterline, it's not a disconnect, it's a connection. It's an intersection. It's where those intersections live. But it's easier to live above the waterline. It's easier not to have to lower the waterline to get into those messy little bits of who we are in our lives. It's easier to keep separated. This sermon, this day, this encouragement, that poem that was read, is about thinking about what's in it for us if we lower the waterline, if we are together in those intersections. Audre Lorde, lesbian, African-American, feminist poet, talked about intersections and these intersectionalities as like baking a cake. And I want you to think about that for you and yourself and also for us. That individually it's eggs, it's flour, it's milk, it's all the different kinds of ingredients that you put in the cake. You put it together in the cake, can you tell, if you've done it well, can you tell that it's sugar and flour and eggs and all the different ingredients? It's a thing, it's a cake. That's who we are, folks. I bet if we were to interview each other, we're not going to take the time, but if we were to interview each other, we would find a wealth, a beautiful, wonderful cake that is who we are. That's how I think we can be. We can be as a congregation, as a people, as a community. We can understand those intersections. We can build a place where we can have that beautiful cake, that way of support for each other. But only if we take the time to bake the cake. So can we, first, in an invitation, think about this idea of intersections and working with each other as baking a beautiful cake, rather than first thinking of the messiness of lowering that waterline and finding out about all these different pieces. And the reason that I think this is so important is that we are being asked in this time, and I don't know, I didn't live in times past. I only hear, I only read history books, I only look. But it sure feels like this is an important time. That there's a lot of things that are going on that we are called to be a part of. And I've heard it said that the passage is through, not over, not around, but through. We need to find a way to be together, to go through this time, not to avoid, but to learn. I want us to take just a minute before I move on and take a pulse of how you're feeling with this week that's passed and the times that we're in and the words that I've already spoken, and just take a moment to breathe out that which no longer serves you and to breathe in radical imagination and boldness. Just take a moment, breathe out that which no longer serves you. Breathe in radical imagination and boldness. For me, it was no accident that I went to that class on Tuesday. Because you see, I've been tired. I've been really tired. Life is really lifey. There is so much work to be done. There's so much pain. There's so much that's there. And I was energized, even as I was disturbed, even as I was shaken. And one of the quotes, again, an Audre Lorde quote, there is no such thing as a single issue struggle, because we do not live single issue lives. And so, where is the good news in this? I come from a Christian background, and I come from listening to people who went through sermons, through seminary, and one pastor once said, his preaching professor said that there should always be good news in a sermon. And I'm going to tell you, folks, I don't think the Christians have a corner on the market of that. I think for all of us, wherever we come from, for whatever brings us here, we need some good news in the middle of all of this. Do you need some good news today? Okay, the first good news is that you're here. All right? There's an awful lot of places you could be today, okay? And I am thankful on this gorgeous, beautiful day that you're either in on your computer or you're in this sanctuary. We're here, okay? We have each other. Do you have each other's backs? Can I get an amen? Okay, we are here, we have each other's backs. Have you, any of you, and if you're new and you're just coming to this church, there's a lovely ledge up there, a lovely balcony area where there are tiles. It's like the tiles that have our 7 principles as you use. Have you read the 7 principles recently? Okay, which one of those 7 principles has to do with the intersections and how we work together in our lives? Yes. Pick one. Pat picked number 3, okay? All of them. We are a part of a community, a larger community, but a community in this place and everywhere that starts from the basis of intersectionality and loving and being with each other and having each other's backs. The passage is through. Not over, not around, but through. And even in that, my friends, is some good news. Because if we go through, if we learn, if we grow, if we are part of a change, if we seek to dismantle white supremacy, the different things, even this ruling that was just spoken about this Friday, years and years of turmoil and struggle, if we together seek to go through, we will crumble, crack, reconfigure, and also re-energize, recreate together a different way of being. What do you think about that? Would you like to have a different way, a reassembled way of being? Some cracks in the old way, because this course that I was in, one of the things that struck me, there were so many things, but one of the things that struck me is the whole idea of white supremacy, the whole idea of separateness is to disconnect us from ourselves, to disconnect us from the land, and to disconnect us from others. So here's the other good news. Have you been paying attention during this service? We started with a land acknowledgement. So here's the good news for this person. Maybe I'm going to be less about the land acknowledgement being read at the beginning of the service, right? Maybe I'll start there. Maybe I'll really listen to it and I'll understand what it's doing for us as a part of reconnecting us. Maybe I'll be more aware of climate change. I like to think that I'm aware of it. I like to give lip service to all the things I do on behalf, recycling this, doing that. What could I do? Because here is the bottom line, folks. if we don't pay attention to climate change, if we don't deal with something having to do with our planet, most of this other stuff that we're worried about is not going to really matter so much. So of course there's an intersectionality with that. Asylum seekers, those that are undocumented, LGBTQI issues may seem a little bit self-serving for me, but as a friend of mine on Facebook said, you know, maybe before I worry about my marriage, or when other people worry about marriage equality, maybe we can be worried just for a moment about what's been taken away from women, turning back the clock 50 years. Can we today, right where we are, can we stop for a moment? Can we look around? I'm serious, folks. Stop and look around. Look behind you. Look around. Look around. Look up on the screen. Think about your communities. Think about your families. Are you willing? Are you willing to lean into those interconnections? Are you willing to lower that water line? Because it's also like having on one of those bright yellow glasses that you get sometimes when you go, and or the glasses you get for different kinds of things for glare. What happens when you put on that bright yellow pair of glasses, when you put it first on for the first time? What's the world look like? Yellow, very yellow. But if I had put a pair of those glasses on at the beginning of the service, and now I'm looking out at you, what am I seeing? I don't see yellow anymore. I just see the world. That's how it is with my life. This week shook me out of my malaise, shook me out of my tiredness, shook me out of my sense of being a single issue person in just an individual floating around like my own little iceberg in a sea of my own stuff. It brought me right back to the center of the intersections, to the center of all the ways that I am connected with each one of you here, with all of humanity, even the humanity I'm not so wild about sometimes. So here is the good news, my friends. We have the 7 principles. We have, and just to bring this in, I'm reading this book that's called The Rise of Economic and Racial Justice Coalitions in Cities. It talks about what happened after 2020 and how coalitions and bringing ourselves together can make things better. We have that already. I'm going to call out Hector in the back there. We are putting together our social justice information and learning online, so be looking for information about that. We already have coalitions, we have groups. It's part of the reason of having the folks reading the poem together today. Do you have a place you're plugged in to make a difference at the intersections? There's a lot of places to do. Find a group, find an event, find a thing, and now I'm going to have a shameless plug. Tomorrow night, the Racial Justice Task Force will meet with our monthly drop-in. Come and join us. Talk about these things. Puzzle it, work it through. Let's find a way together to take those intersections, to build and to bake a beautiful cake. Because I don't know about you, I don't want to eat flour all the time. Let's do it together. We, my friends, the good news, we have it within our power. Let us journey through together. Amen. Ashe, blessed be. I get Christian every now and then. And let's, if we can, sing our closing hymn together, answering the call of love. And let's, folks, sing it like you mean it. Let's answer that call.
Please stand and join us. We're going to start with the chorus. We're going to sing the chorus twice. And then if you know the verse really well, please feel free to jump in. If you don't know it really well, feel free to jump in. And jump in real strong on the chorus every time. We are answering the call of love.
and now go forth from this place to answer the call of love, to stay curious, to be a participant spectator, to allow space for imperfection, and to understand that discomfort is okay. We can go through. Wish you peace this day, but not a peace that is passive, but a peace that is active, a peace where we live in the intersections, where we bake a beautiful cake together. Amen. Amen. Blessed be. Peace be with you till we meet again. As God lays its path before you, leave no feather floating o'er you. Peace be with you till we meet again. Go in peace. We don't have a coffee hour per se, but you're invited to gather at socially distanced place with masks and